Welcome to Safety Talk. Personal safety expert Pete Canavan shares his insights and interviews experts who provide simple and effective tips, techniques, and technologies to keep you safe and secure both online and off. Here's Pete.
Hello and welcome to Safety Talk. We've got another great episode for you today. Now, we don't talk about overall health and wellness on the show frequently, but every day each and every one of us faces health challenges that can directly impact our safety. So if you're stressed out, distracted, maybe tired from, lack of sleep, or simply burned out, you might become careless, and that could cause you to make mistakes, or maybe may even make decisions that could directly or indirectly impact your safety and your well-being. So, with so much of our lives being online, the chances of us making mistakes by clicking the wrong thing, right? Because we're not paying attention, or maybe even answering a certain question correctly, increases dramatically. And of course, in the offline world, that can also impact how we're dealing with other people, right? Our family, our friends, our coworkers. And so we're going to address this important topic on this episode. And I'm sure that it is one that, for certain, most of our subscribers can relate to in one way or another. So, speaking of subscribers, if you have not already, please be sure to subscribe to Safety Talk on your favorite podcast network or our YouTube channel at safetytalkvideos.com. That way you won't miss an episode. Appreciate you helping us spread the word about safety. I'm your host and safety sensei, Pete Canavan, and my guest on this episode of Safety Talk is Dr. Cheryl Okoli. Dr. Okoli has some initials after her name. I'll let her explain those to you. DHA, MSN, BSN, is an experienced healthcare professional and health executive consultant with over 20 years of experience in healthcare. She has had many roles in the front lines as a leader, as a solopreneur, and she's very passionate about bridging the gaps in healthcare by introducing innovative solutions to ensure safety and excellence. And of course, safety is our focus on the show. So how does Dr. Okoli do this? Let's find out. It's my pleasure to welcome her to Safety Talk. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me on your talk here. So you asked a few questions about my initials. And first and foremost, I know I'd say thank you, and I'll say it again because the topic of safety is one that really needs to be addressed across industries and in our families as well. So what do my initials mean? So the DHA, which was listed first, stands for Doctor of Health Administration. So I have a doctorate in health administration. The MSN is my Master of Science in Nursing, and the BSN is my Bachelor of Science in Nursing. So you can see with those credentials, it kind of paints a glimpse of my background in terms of where I've worked professionally. Not so much in location, but in terms of my professional title, if you will. So you asked me a question, how do I achieve safety?
Well, I mean, we appreciate you joining us, obviously, because we're all busy today. As parents, as professionals, as spouses. As our parents get older, we become caregivers. And sometimes our own personal safety and health get pushed to the side, right?
Yes.
And strangely enough, in the hectic healthcare industry, which is an industry that exists to keep us all healthy, there exist problems among healthcare executives, corporate leaders, in that industry. Specifically burnout, which is, I know, one of your areas of expertise. But it is a big problem, isn't it? Not just for those in the healthcare field, but basically everybody who faces, stresses in their daily life.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So okay, this is a huge topic. And I'm very much visual in my approach. I think through frameworks. So how about we address your question looking at the different pillars? So when I talk about different pillars, so when I consult, I look at 5 main pillars usually, like leadership, workforce development, organization coaching, climate, partnerships, and financial practices. And what I mean by that is, so let's say, for example, when we talk about stress, safety. So safety is a big topic. Think of it as a big umbrella. So under safety, you could have physical safety, you could have psychological safety, you could have financial safety, risk management. It all depends on how one wants to look at it. So let's talk about a few of those arms I've talked about. So let's talk about physical safety. So when we talk about physical safety in the healthcare industry, it's much more than just the physical safety of the physical environment, healthcare providers, the patients, or leaders work in. It's also about the physical environment or the physical safety of the individual employees and clients that we serve, right? And then
Sure.
when you talk about psychological safety, which is a big one, right? Because when you talk about stress, yeah, the healthcare environment can be very stressful, but the reason for the stress, there are myriad reasons for that. It could be stress due to maybe decreased resources in terms of human resources, maybe not enough staff, or it could be decrease in financial resources for us to have the equipment and resources we need for organization to function effectively and efficiently, right? So when we talk about psychological safety, it's also about, for those who do not know this, it's also about when you express an opinion, for instance, you feel comfortable doing it. You don't feel afraid that you're going to be chastised for it or ostracized if you have a difference of opinion in a group, or if you want to provide suggestions as to how to deal with the shortages, that you won't be ostracized. You feel comfortable, right? So that's one angle of looking at psychological safety. And of course, it ties in with other aspects, but when you think of it psychological, so your mind, your mental well-being as well. So how you feel safe in that respect as well. And also has to do with how you interact with your employees. So stress. I always like to ask people when I hear the word stress, I don't like to be presumptuous. I like to ask, tell me about your stress. Because I can come up with my opinions and assumptions, but one of the biggest things we don't want to ever do is have assumptions. So ask questions, okay? It's how we ask is what helps elicit the proper responses. And what I mean by proper responses, number one, you want to be able to break down barriers so people are not defensive. Because when people hear the word why, some get very defensive, right? So it's how you ask the why. So with stress, I like to say that there is well, you could have stress that's related to physical issues happening with you. It could be the work environment. So stress itself has multifactorial reasons for it, and they're different, and depending on if it's physical or psychological stress, there are different strategies, or work stress, there are different strategies as to how to cope with it. So bringing in the whole safety issue, it's
Well, and we all have
incumbent.
different stressors too, right? Because
Yeah,
something that might
exactly.
stress you out maybe doesn't stress me out. So we
Exactly.
have different levels that, you know, we can get to, right? We all have that, I guess, that stress point, that breaking point, right? Where,
Yes,
we can deal, and all of a sudden now we can't deal, right? Or things become more overwhelming. And now that is something that we've got to know how to, I think, recognize it, right? We
yes,
got to be able to
yes.
recognize that this is happening, and then number two, figure out ways that we can reduce those stresses so we don't, go crazy and lash out or have
Absolutely.
further physical, potential health problems, because we all know stress is a huge contributor to physical health problems.
Absolutely. So good point there. So when I ask someone why, tell me about your stress. Not why are you stressed? Tell me about your stress. Because tell me about stress is open-ended. It gives a person an opportunity to describe and tell you. As opposed to why are you stressed? They'd be like, oh my goodness, is that a trick question? Shouldn't I be stressed? Like, what are they getting at? So yes, stressors. I like to define stress in two ways. Eustress or distress. Distress is the negative form of stress. Eustress is good. Like when you hear things like eulogy, when you give someone a eulogy kind of thing, something positive about someone's life, like usually when they've passed on. But with stress, eustress has to do with like things that, yes, that could be stressful in your life, but it's as a result of something positive that's happened. So the classic example I like to give is like, let's say, for example, the birth or the expectation of the birth of a long-awaited child. Okay. The key is
Okay.
long awaited. So yes, there's going to be stressors in terms of the mother and the father, in terms of maybe getting ready, getting the nursery ready, financially preparing for it, or when the child does come, waking up at night. But it's you stress. Does that make sense? Versus distress, which is this is not what I signed up for. This is not what I'm planning for in the workplace as well, right? So if, let's say, for example, in the
Gotcha.
workplace, you were promised so before you got a job, for instance, at an interview, it seemed excellent. And you had this contract that you signed. And then when you come to the workplace, you feel like you were deceived in terms of maybe the resources that you were promised you would have, the number of hours you would work, right? So right there, there's a disconnect in what you were told and what you're seeing on the job. That can cause extreme stress for people.
Absolutely. Something's
Mhm.
not what you expect it to be. That immediately is going to throw you off, right? Because now
Exactly.
you're uncomfortable, you know,
Exactly.
and that could cause stress, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that something is dangerous or whatnot, but
Mhm.
it
Mhm.
causes stress because you're uncomfortable. It's one of the things that I talk about, is if, you could be perfectly safe, but if you are put into an environment that is unfamiliar to you,
Mhm.
you're going to feel unsafe because you're not comfortable, right?
Exactly. And then your body starts reacting physiologically. That
Mhm.
fight and flight mechanism kicks in, and your cortisol levels shoot up. And the body was not made to have high levels of cortisol just cascading through it. Don't get me wrong, cortisol within limit is good.
Right.
The fight and flight response is good within limit. But when you're always on stress, always stressed rather, those high levels of cortisol shooting through your body, you might even get to what's called adrenal fatigue. So your adrenal glands, right? So, and all that can cause negative effects on your health because we're not just the physical. We're holistic being. And what I mean by that, we're human beings are made up of the physical, mental, social, cultural, spiritual domains. So anything that affects it physiologically will affect the other domains, right?
Like a
Yeah.
domino effect.
Exactly, exactly. And again, as an employee in the workplace, what affects you negatively because you don't live in silos and you don't work in solitary. Well, there's a few people who do work solitary, but overall, whatever happens to you affects other people, even those who are solopreneurs. You
Mhm.
cannot function or have your business independently. You have partners. When I say partners, it could be external partners like vendors or whoever, right? You cannot be successful, or clients, right? You need your clients to have that business, right? So if your health is jeopardized, how will you be able to function to even want to market or recruit and things like that, right?
Sure,
So
it's going to
yeah,
affect everything.
Absolutely. So speaking about the whole burnout, it's important that we recognize what burnout is. A group of authors, Makikanga and et al. In 2012 said, and I'm going to paraphrase their description of what burnout is. So burnout is basically when, and number one, it's found in normal people. And the
Mhm.
reason why I stress normal people, burnout is not the same as mental health or mental illness. Forgive me.
Right,
Two
right.
different things. So burnout, according to this group of authors, basically think of three things. If you begin to find yourself more exhausted than normal, more cynical than normal, and you find out your productivity is decreasing or has decreased significantly, chances are you might be burning out. Okay. So the key is now recognizing, number one, are you burned out? Number two, preventing you from getting burnout. So bringing it back to the workplace and safety here, I believe the onus is bilateral in terms of the employee and the employer to ensure that employees do not get burnout. And let's not forget about the senior leaders. Sometimes they get a bad rep, but they too are human and they too can get burnout as well. And when people start getting burned out, not only does the individual that's burned out suffer, the employees, the clients and patients in service, the client and patients that they serve, and then that has a ripple effect on the productivity of the organization as well.
So
And
specifically regarding like the term burnout, right? We hear that
mhm,
term burnout,
yes.
but I don't think it's not a simple term, I guess, really to define because it could be different for different people. Or is there, I mean, we've all heard the term, but is it like where you get to the point where you kind of quit, you throw in the towel, like I just can't do this anymore, or I need a vacation, or you know what I mean? Like how do we, I mean, we all are stressed as you're talking about, right? And there are different levels of stress and how we all each handle stress. But how does somebody, I guess, sort of recognize that they're either approaching that quote burnout
Mhm.
or are actually in a burnout, I guess, mode?
Mhm.
And then how would they sort of, after they recognize it, say, I got to do something to get me back to where,
Mhm.
I can function again.
Excellent. Now, let's start again. I mentioned your three main areas those group of authors mentioned. Right now, even you, if you just stop and reflect, and anyone else listening, just stop and reflect. Are you feeling more exhausted than normal?
Hmm.
Are you feeling more cynical than normal? And do you feel your work productivity has decreased? You can apply those three questions to the family as well, regardless of your workplace and industry. Just ask yourself those honest questions. And if you get two out of three, one out of three is okay, yellow flag. Two out of three, okay, it's like that alarm starts alarming, and three out of three definitely burnout. Having said that, though, there are some layman tools you can actually take surveys to actually assess your burnout. Now, asking that question, I had the honor and privilege to interview the guru of burnout, Dr. Christina Maslach. In all psychology and different resources, she's highly quoted in her work in burnout. Now, she does have a tool for different industries to assess the employees if they're burning out. Some might say it's used for research only. Yeah and nay. She did tell me yes, it's more so for the research world, but there's still benefit in it. Okay. So if you were just to type in her name and look for surveys, that will help you for sure.
What was her name
Now,
again?
how do you recognize one is burning out? Sometimes, good point. We all have blind spots. Sometimes we do not know how we are reacting or acting. It's the people close to us who begin to recognize this person is acting differently or functioning or performing different from their baseline. So in the healthcare field, we have something called a baseline. So when we talk about people's blood pressure, their blood work, and all that, there's a baseline, which means basically what's their normal. And then when we recognize there's an issue, is when they're either below their normal or above their normal. So that baseline. So the same token in the workplace, if you had a high achiever employee who all of a sudden starts performing below their normal, it behooves employees and their supervisors to start asking questions. Is everything okay with you? The same token, even in the family, asking the same question. It usually is a spouse that will recognize, or the children that will recognize a mom and dad a little bit more cranky than usual.
Joy, that never
Right?
happens, right?
Yes, and it's unfortunate, really unfortunate that sometimes we employees, we know how to close our mouths most of the time, shut our mouths at the workplace, but we come home and dump it on our family members, the ones that we
Mm.
love, the ones we shouldn't do that because when it's all thick and thin, usually they're the ones who stay by our sides, right? So
Right. No,
yes,
that's very
so
true. You keep it in because you can't blow up on your boss, and then you come home and the littlest thing happens and you snap at your spouse or your kids, and that's not
yeah,
fair to them. And and afterwards you probably feel terrible because you're like, man, but everything's bottled up inside, and it's like it's got to come out at some point.
okay. Yeah, so here's some practical tools. I don't know, have you ever heard of the mnemonic called HALT?
Halt?
Yes, as in HALT.
Nope.
HALT. It's not mine, it's not my original, but this will be helpful. H stands for hungry, A, angry, L, lonely, excuse me, excuse me,
Gosh, what was L?
L, lonely,
Lonely. Oh, okay.
and T, tired. So
Gotcha.
the premise is, excuse me,
So what's hangry?
exactly, right? So the premise is if you're feeling any one of those emotions, do not make a hasty decision. Excuse me.
Oh, that's fine.
Woo!
Well, no, because you're going to be distracted by hunger or because you're pissed off or there's something else going on and tired.
Yeah,
Like I thought I was going to get a good night's sleep last night, but I didn't, so I'm a little tired
exactly.
today. So it's, you deal with it. But so so halt what does that helps you identify that
So,
is going on?
yes. So basically, it basically helps you stop so you don't make a hasty decision or a decision that could be detrimental for you in the workplace in terms of maybe if you're making a business decision or you're serving patients. So it's basically a tool that makes you stop and reprogram your mind and say, you know what, I need to readdress this issue when I've taken care of my hunger or when I'm not
Mhm.
angry.
Right.
So now one might say if you're burning out or stressed out, you may not think of that easily. True. But again, hence the reason why we educate people, right? That there is this mnemonic you can walk through. Now, further than that, I do have a proprietary mnemonic that I can invite people to visit. It's a free gift you can access on my other website. So you mentioned earlier that I like to talk about burnout. I'm passionate about burnout. So
Mhm.
because of this, I myself, I'll say I was close to burning out. I don't think I ever was fully burned out once upon a time in my career, but I decided to be a solution to that. One of the things that came out of that is a retreat that I provide for those in the healthcare industry, regardless of hierarchy. So they can be in the front lines, executive level, academia, research, it doesn't matter. But anyway, with me always trying to serve and make things easier for people, I came up with a mnemonic called recalibrate. And each of those letters, I won't really go into all of them right now, but I invite you to visit one of my websites for my retreat, www.renata.care. Renata is spelled Renata. When you go to that website, under the More tab, click on free gifts, download free gifts. It gives you a sheet, a one-page sheet of recalibrate, and each of that helps you assess where you're at. Number one, for example, why are you doing what you're doing? What should you be doing? What should you prioritize? The importance of celebrating what you've done, the importance of seeking help. If you need to seek help, professional help, right? Because
Right.
with burnout, we don't want it to spiral down to a mental illness. Never. And you ask what kind of mental illness? It could be anxiety,
Mhm.
depression. I'm not talking about those high, severe ones like bipolar, schizophrenia, but even anxiety and depression are serious topics and serious issues. The productivity of organizations, they lose lots of money sometimes for sick time related to mental health illness, right? So that's why it's incumbent and it behooves executives and senior leaders to really ensure that they're doing what they can to take care of burnout. So going back to what he said, everyone's it's different. Yes, everyone's coping ability is different. However, there's a difference between occupational burnout and burnout related to maybe what's happening at home. With occupational burnout, I do say senior leaders have a responsibility to ensure that their workforce is not burning out. And the employees have a responsibility to ensure that whatever is happening at home, try their best, it doesn't trickle into the workplace.
Mhm.
Try their best
Right.
because we're
Vice
all
or vice
human.
versa, right?
Exactly, right? So how can they, yeah. So I'll pause there to take any questions you might have. I could keep going on and on, as you can tell.
No, no, this is all good stuff because our society is so fast paced, right? And we all
Yes.
have tons of stresses. We have lots of pressures on us,
Mhm.
whether it's something that's economic pressures because prices are going up, or,
Yes.
it pressures because maybe we have kids in school that aren't doing well or not behaving as well as we like, or maybe they're, looking at colleges and we're stressing about how we're going to pay for college with them. Or, I mean, everybody at different phases in their lives have different sets of stressors, and I think as parents we all have similar stressors to a certain extent with some of these things, right when
Yes.
you're a new parent, you're stressed out because, oh my God, this is brand new, I don't know what to
Yeah.
do, am I doing things right, am I, is the baby okay, the kid's crying, why, I fed him, they've got a clean diaper, right? We have these stresses as a parent that especially as new parents. And then, as they say, little kids, little stresses, big kids, big stresses.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
You worry about different things, right? Kid borrows the car, it's a little bit more of a stress than, or they, riding their bike to their kids down the road. So, there's different sets of stresses, but then you couple that with stresses that might be happening at work, right? Maybe
Yeah.
maybe there's a round of layoffs that are going to be happening at your job, and you
Yes.
know about it, right? And you're stressed about that. It's like, oh man, I can't afford to lose my job. I got to pay for my kids' college. How am I going to do that? I'm in my mid 50s. How am I going to find a new job? Who's going to want to hire me? So
Yeah.
we have all of these things that go on in our minds, and I think that self-talk
Yeah.
can help or can hurt us
Mm-hmm.
because it can end up making you crazy, right? Because you
Mm-hmm.
start thinking to yourself, what if, or if this happens, or if this occurs, right? So we have all of these things. We play out these what if scenarios in our heads, and
Mm-hmm.
so I don't know. Do you have any sort of suggestions for someone that maybe has a lot of that going on? Maybe they have a lot of stresses at work, they've got some stresses at home, and they've just got all of these things that they keep running over in our minds. Like, how do you sort of quiet those voices, or maybe you can't really quiet them, but how do you tame those voices so that it doesn't affect us in a physical way with our health and with potentially ultimately our safety? Because if we're not healthy and we can't perform and do our jobs and we can't be good parents, that's not good for anybody. It's not good for us, it's not good for our families, and that
Okay.
can end up spiraling out of control, and you get into this really bad place that we all know. You start getting sucked into one of those you know downward spirals. It's easy
Yes.
to devolve into, like you mentioned, even some mental illness problems, right? Or
Yeah.
even if it's
Yeah.
just severe anxiety, or maybe
Yeah.
get really depressed. These are very important things that directly and indirectly both affect our safety, our security, and our ability to function and
Yes.
live a good life, right?
Yes. Okay.
I threw a lot out there, I know.
Yes, but I can summarize it two things. Number one, support systems.
Mm.
What support systems does one have within and outside of the workplace? But now, I'd mentioned earlier, I wasn't going to go into recalibrate, but everything you just asked can be addressed through that one page here. But I'll take this opportunity and just share it.
Oh,
Okay.
you've got the magic pill. All right, everybody, go to Renata
Let's,
Doc Care and go go
well,
go
hey, I
reduce
don't
your
take
stress.
credit for anything. I don't take full credit. You see, when I reflect on things, I'm a very spiritual person in terms of when I use the word spiritual, I'm a Christ follower. I always pray about different things. How can I be a solution? Give
Mhm.
me a quick cheat sheet or something that I can leave with people. That'll be something tangible they can live with. And that's how recalibrates came to me within minutes. So R, like I said, it's a mnemonic, recalibrate. So imagine you're writing down the word recalibrate in a vertical manner.
Mhm.
R stands for recalibrate. Why are you doing what you're doing? Who do you need to focus on first? E, you need to educate yourself about the question you just asked about who do you need to focus on first and why are you doing what you're doing. C, when you do accomplish a goal, no matter how minute it is, you need to celebrate it.
Very
Celebration
true.
could be as simple as going out for your favorite dessert, watching that sunset. Yes, if you can afford to go on a vacation, do it. Now, A, assess holistically in terms of my physical, mental, social, cultural, spiritual domains. How am I doing in those areas? L, you want to liberate negative thinking patterns. You brought that up.
Mm.
You really want to liberate that, flipping the script.
Yes, yes.
Someone said something like, even as simple as, oh, let's say, okay, this might sound trivial, but I want you to think deeply about what I'm gonna use with this simple example. Let's say you just spill water. You'd be like, oops, I just spilled this water. Oh, how foolish of me. But what if you were to flip the script and say, oh my, oh, now that surface is gonna be a little bit cleaner now.
Right, right.
Right? And you can apply that mindset no matter what your workplace is, okay? Now, B, believe in yourself. Now, I know some people will be like, you know what? I've had so many things happen, one thing after the other. Like you talked about layoffs, or I'm older, who's going to hire me, and all of that. The truth is this. Honestly, if you're still in this world right now as we're speaking, you're needed in this world. I always leave my podcast, my TV show with this phrase with people. I always say, you are needed in this world to be a solution. Be the best that you can, and do not rob the world of a precious gem, you.
I
Okay?
like it. I like that a
Thank,
lot.
thank
It's so
you.
true because we're all individuals and we all have
Yes,
something unique to
yes,
contribute.
yes, exactly. And then R means relinquish control of what you cannot. We can't do everything. We're not Superman. We might have our own superpowers that's different from someone else, but you have some strengths. So basically looking at your strengths. Yes, we have areas for improvement as well, but if you're forever dwelling on the areas of improvement, how are you gonna harness your strengths to bless others and serve your workplace and your families? Okay. A, accept that you are only human. T, trust the process. What do I mean by that? Let's use you and I, for example. Our paths crossed not too long ago, and you had your journey to get you to where you are right now. I do not know the adversity and the triumphs you experienced to get to where you are, to do all the things you do for work and for your family. You had your unique process. I also I had a different journey to bring me to where I am right now. Now, is that to say that we've both arrived where we want to? Yes, you might have. For me, I know there are other things I need to do. But the point is, we all have a process. I
Mhm.
like to use a classic example of when you're baking a cake, okay? What is okay, where do you get the best delights in eating a cake, if you like a cake? Let me just ask you, what's the delight? What's the delight in eating a cake for you?
It could be the cake itself, or it
Okay.
could be the occasion that I'm eating the cake for.
Okay, excellent, excellent. So now let's bring it down to the cake itself. Imagine if I served you a half-baked cake. How would you feel?
Well, I would obviously be disappointed because a good cake is good, right? Half baked is no bueno, no good.
Exactly. So in the same token, think of it as your life's journey, or if you want to achieve a certain career level. If you were to serve, not you, generic you out there, if you were to serve someone the half-baked career or the half-baked skills, do you think they'll be happy with you and your services? No. So my point is we have to trust the process to get to where we need to get to in order to be, if you will, presented to the world, be it our workplaces and so forth. We all have different processes. And that's why I always say never envy someone out there because you have no idea what it took them to get to where they are.
Very
And then
true.
last but
We
not
all have our
least,
own challenges, right? We've all taken different
absolutely.
paths, and sometimes our paths cross, like us, like you said, right? You took
Exactly,
some one way,
right?
I took another way, but yet here we are today.
Exactly. For such a time as this, we didn't meet last year. We didn't meet 5 years ago. We're meeting today for this
Mhm.
episode of your podcast. And when I think about it, again, whoever will listen to us and hear us, hopefully what we've shared today will be a blessing to them. And again, they'll be hearing it when they need to hear it. So again, the trust in the process, right? Right. And then last but not least, E, enthusiasm is the way forward. What do I mean by that? You got to be enthusiastic. Sometimes we have to be our own cheerleader. It's helpful. So I mentioned earlier about support systems.
Mhm.
In the home, it's good to have support system. Not everyone has that. But you know what? Find a group where you can be supported or find a person that can support you, even if it's one confidant. Even in the workplace, yes, it's good if you have a healthy workplace. So going back to that psychological safety, whereby employees trust one another, they don't compete in an unhealthy manner. Let me pause there. When I say they don't compete in an unhealthy manner, some departments thrive on competition, but there's a difference between healthy and destructive competition, right?
Absolutely. No,
Right?
I did
So
support systems. I think you really that needs to be brought more into the light, right? Because that's something that sometimes a lot of times people feel like they're alone in their struggle, or nobody understands them, or you know, because life can become overwhelming, as we've said,
Yes.
and having a support system that's there, whether it's your family, your friends, maybe a group of workers or someone that,
Yeah.
that you can relate to, that you can bounce things off of, and get validation for what you're doing, or get support for what you're doing, or have other people to just commiserate with, right? I mean,
Yeah,
a lot of
exactly.
times that's a very important thing, because just getting stuff off your chest sometimes makes you feel better. And we've all had that experience, right? Where something's been bothering us,
Yes.
and we don't know how to, we don't know how to get it out. And all of a sudden it might even be a total stranger that you just dump
Yeah.
stuff on, and
Yes.
you just feel great, because all of a sudden it's a relief. It's off of you. But if you have
Absolutely.
a structured support system, you've got a spouse, you've got, parents, you've got teachers, or whoever it is in your life that you can talk to about it, that support system is key. So yeah, I agree. You really need to lean on that when
Mhm.
you need to. And if you've got a good support system, they're going to be more than happy to be leaned on.
Yes, absolutely. So two things you mentioned. I'm going to talk about trust shortly. Remind me in case I forget. But the support system, I agree. And as you were talking, I was like thinking, and also, how can we be a support system to somebody?
Mm,
So we need to be healthy ourselves, do whatever it takes for us to get to a place that we can be a support system, be that confident for somebody, right? And okay, so going back to safety, psychological safety, having a just culture. I'm not sure if you're familiar with our term, but in the healthcare industry, it's used a just culture, which basically says, I paraphrase, that we live in an environment or we work in an environment where to err is human.
mm,
There will be mistakes, but how does the system, the culture, handle mistakes? Of course, in the healthcare industry, we have to be very careful because some mistakes are life-threatening, right?
right, right.
But the reality is that mistakes will happen. Now, the question is, what do we put in place in terms of safety to prevent mistakes from happening? And when they do happen, do we have reporting systems? Do we have a culture that's safe enough that people feel comfortable filling out those incident reports? Or near misses? Near misses mean basically something harmful didn't happen, but could have happened, but was caught before it. So if we work in an environment where they encourage people to be transparent and honest, more reports will be submitted, which in turn will be helpful in the planning stages to implement policies and systems and processes that prevent mistakes from happening. The just culture again has to do with not penalizing people for when they do make mistakes. So that again points to how healthy is that work environment. I mentioned when I consult, I talk about leadership, workforce development, organizational culture, and climate. So I like to say the climate. What's the climate like? Is it cold? Now that's pun intended. Is it a
Mm.
cold environment
Right,
or is it
right.
one that's receptive for different things and the culture? Okay. So that's what I wanted to mention there. And then in terms of trust, trust is integral, right? As employees working in an organization, you have to have trust that your employer will do what they said they would do. And the employer has to have trust in the employees to do what they signed up to do. When that's damaged, things just start unraveling,
Mm.
unfortunately. So it could be as simple as trust, like as trust as in, oh, you're going to pay me when you say you're going to pay me, or you're going to have the resources available for whatever work we need to do. They have trust in healthcare, the front line, that they'll provide excellent, safe services to the patients that they serve, right? So we have to watch that trust. And
And
coming
the
back to
thing
the,
about trust too is, it takes a long time to build trust up, but it takes
Mhm.
a fraction of that time to destroy trust.
Yes,
And it's very important to nurture and to develop that trust and to protect it.
yes,
Right?
yeah.
Because if like we're talking about like in a workplace environment, if your employees trust you, they trust the process, they trust the policies, they trust the systems, they trust the reporting, and they have the faith in all of those systems, you're going to have a much better, more productive work environment, regardless of
Mhm.
what industry you're in. right? But if
Yes.
you don't have that trust or something happens that breaks that trust, well,
Mhm.
you may never get it back. Or if you do get it back, it may take a long time. But in the meantime, that the breaking of that trust can cause all kinds of other issues because now that communication may not be as free flowing as it was because that trust has been broken. So it's like now maybe I don't want to bring that to my boss, or maybe I don't want to let them know about something. And then ultimately, depending again upon the industry, depend upon your
Yep.
job, could have serious consequences, so maybe even life-threatening consequences.
Absolutely. So this is what I suggest we can do. So with the issue of trust, yes, some might say it's an intangible thing, but you can actually measure certain things. And trust is one thing I do believe, like for example, and I'm just thinking on the spot here, but I think
Mhm.
it's very valid. So you know how we all have some sort of appraisals in our workplaces. Some workplaces may not have the yearly appraisals. They might have one-on-one meetups, one-on-one meetings, or
Mhm.
every 3 months or whatever it is. Having that integrated in that process, either a formal appraisal process or in a conversational process during your one-on-one meetups. And why do I mention that? Trust. So yes, so let's say you have an organization that's functioning wonderfully. Trust, there's no issues with trust. But the reality is, we're all human beings. We're not going to be there forever. Leadership is going to come and grow. What happens when new leadership comes that maybe you begin to see trust breaking down, or a new member is added to your team? Now, on that note, I just thought of the group formation principles here. Have you
Okay.
heard of the forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning?
Okay, that's new to me.
Okay, so the reason why I bring that up is whenever you have new team members, it can depend, regardless of industry and department. Those team members are going to go through 4 processes or 5, depending on which literature you're looking at. The first one is norming. Oh, sorry, hang on, forming.
Mhm.
So that's why it's important at the interview stage when you're selecting who to hire. Be very careful who you hire onto your team. Okay. So the forming stage is you get these team members coming together as you form the group. Okay. And then you're going to go through what's called storming. Why? Because we're all individuals. We all think differently. No matter if you hire people of the same discipline, they're all going to practice slightly different. Yes, they have code of ethics and policies to adhere to, but they're going to practice differently because we're individuals. Okay.
Absolutely, sure.
So the storming phase happens when maybe there's difference of opinions. I talk a lot about conflict here, different of opinions, values, and aims, but it doesn't have to spiral into destructive conflict. So my point in mentioning the storming phase, it's gonna happen, but you need a strong leader to guide the group and team to say, you know what, this is a normal process of team formation, but we mustn't let it spiral, our disagreement spiral down to destructive. There's constructive conflict, but it mustn't spiral down to destructive. So when you have the forming, storming, then you have norming, things begin to start normalizing in terms of people understand their expectations, begin to start understanding people's personalities, hopefully. And then the
Mhm.
last one is performing. Now they start performing based on the shared visions and missions of the organization. Okay, they understand the values and goals and they're performing. Another group of authors added another step, which you may or may not see, but which is a reality. It's called adjourning, which means sometimes people exit that group. Now, exiting is not a bad thing. The question is, why did they exit? Did they exit because, you know what? You know what? I can't achieve more skills here. I can attain more skills. I've given all that I can. I want to go elsewhere to grow. Or maybe my passions have changed. That's
Mhm.
more like a healthy sort of exit, the adjourning,
Right.
versus a destructive one where they're like, you know what, I was bullied, I've been burned out, no one is listening, there's so much safety issues here, and they leave, right? So I
Mhm.
just share that to, again, it's part of group dynamics, team dynamics, those 4 stages. But it's important for people to understand that, especially leaders to understand. Because sometimes when people start seeing turnovers, they're like, what's happening? But the question is, wait a minute, take a deep breath. Is that a positive kind of turnover, like the adjourning, or is it negative? And if it's obviously negative and destructive, which of course will affect every other pillar I've mentioned, like the leadership, it will affect your workforce. And how expensive that will be, you need to really pay attention to that.
No, that was excellent. I appreciate you going over that. That's something I hadn't heard before, but I mean, it makes perfect sense, as you lay it out, so beautifully there because it helps everybody understand that there are these different dynamics, there's these different stages, these different things that we all go through, right? When we're part of a group, when we're as employees or as bosses, right? The people that are that listen and are subscribe that are, leaders in their industry, leaders in their company, and so drawing attention to that
Yeah.
is extremely important. And of course, the people that are working in those organizations, because there are a lot of things that can affect their work, their environment. Like you said, you bring new people in, you might have a really harmonious team, and then you bring in some
Yes.
person who just does not gel with the rest of the team, and that's going to be extremely disruptive, and it's going to completely destroy that harmony that existed. And so being able to, you have to recognize that, right? You have to maybe get everybody to adjust a little bit, or if it just doesn't work out, well, see ya. We got to get somebody back in, in here that is going to gel better, and it is going to be, contributing to that harmonious, team that we have for whatever your department or your company happens to be. So that's
Well,
very interesting,
yeah.
Doctor. I
Two th
appreciate that.
yeah, two things I want to mention. So those 4 or 5 stages I mentioned were not my original, obviously, but the name of the authors, original authors escapes me. So I just wanted to mention that just for the record. Second, what you said about the person not gelling, I want to provide another perspective.
Okay.
There are different perceptions out there. And here's a theory I highly recommend people look up in their own time. It's called the attribution theory. I won't go into much now, but it's very pertinent for organizational teams and psychology here.
The
So
attribution theory.
attribution theory, yes.
Okay.
It's a kind of perception theory, actually. So when you mention this person that doesn't gel and all that, so my approach would be, why doesn't the person gel? I put on the hat of a root cause analysis, trying to dig down to find out the reason. Now, this person that doesn't gel or perceived to not gel, it could be a few things. Maybe they're practicing in a different manner than the traditional ways of practice. It may not necessarily be bad, it's just different. And the workforce are not used to that. There are people out there who have different levels of excellence and work ethic. When they come into a team, perhaps, or an organization that's not used to practicing that, it does rock the boat to some extent.
Mhm.
Now, is that person necessarily bad? I would say not necessarily, as long as they're not, like, for example, endangering the patients or clients or whatever your client is that you're serving. Maybe they just have a different way of different things and they're challenging others to look at things differently. And that's why
Or
when
they're
I talk
making other
about
people look bad because they're doing too good of a job.
so right there, you just nailed it. So the other parties are jealous. They could
Yeah.
be jealous. So that's why we shouldn't be too hasty to reprimand someone or give someone the boot. Really investigate unbiased investigation to find out why are we hearing all this negative about this person? Is there truth to it? So that's one thing vital I need to leave for if everyone wants to, like, what's worth, but it's important to really take a take time to stop and really assess. And yes, look up the attribution theory and perception theory, because not everything that meets the eye is accurate. Not everything you hear is accurate. And even with trust, verify certain information. How trustworthy is someone? Just because they say, oh, I'm this, I'm that, be wise as well in what you share, who you share, and how you share. In senior leadership, I know we're almost running out of time, but there's something I really want to mention here. There's a difference between sharing information and filtering information. It
Mhm.
was only when I was in the leadership management side of things I understood what those meant. Because I used to think, why isn't senior leadership, when I was on the other side of the equation, why isn't senior leadership being transparent and sharing and telling us things? They were filtering. So my point is there's a time to filter information and there's a time to share information. And I hope people know the wisdom when to choose which and educate your employees, the difference between the two.
I think that's extremely important because I can see where a lot of people may feel they are not being, quote, kept in the loop, right?
Yes.
And it's like,
Mhm.
well, if you knew this, why didn't you tell me about it? Well, because it wasn't relevant, right? It was a distraction, or it had nothing to do with it, or you know what I mean? Or it's something that we decided was not going to be done, or you know what I mean? So,
Yes.
I think that's very important because the communication, again, it's amazing because so much comes back to communication, right?
Yep.
Um, but communicating those reasons to other employees or other managers or whoever, other departments within the company, is going to make for a better, more cohesive and better functioning,
Yep.
work environment.
Hmm.
Um, and so the difference between those two, I think, is very, very important. I hadn't really heard it sort of
Hmm.
talked about that way, but now that I'm sort of reflecting on that, it makes perfect sense because you can see where if someone finds out about something afterwards that, as I said, somebody knew about prior, they may feel slighted, right? It's like, hey, why wasn't I kept in the loop? Am I not important enough? Oh, they think they know better than me or something. It's like, no, it's nothing to do with that. It has to do with the fact that I was just sparing you from having exhaust that need brain power on it because it's irrelevant, right? So
Yeah.
you kind of have to flip it around and be like, no, I'm doing you a favor. Like, if you don't need to worry about it, don't worry about it. Why am I gonna, clog your thoughts up with something
Yep.
that's totally not relevant?
Hmm.
And I have no reason to share that with you, And so it's an important job, obviously, to filter and ultimately disseminate, relevant information and what needs to
Yep.
be shared with other, like I said, departments or employees or whatever within inside an organization. But
Yeah.
um, that's it's interesting because the approach you can see where that approach can be not sort of performed well,
Hmm.
and then it's going to have negative effects, and that's the
Hmm.
last thing we want, right? I mean, we all want
Hmm.
to be in a work environment that we enjoy.
Hmm.
A lot of people don't like their jobs, and if something were to happen that makes them like it even less, well, that's
Hmm.
going to have all kinds of potential negative impact. Maybe they're not going to do their job as well as even more, right? It's like, well, they don't
Yes.
care enough about me, they're not keeping me in a loop, why do I even care about this place, right? So all kinds of weird things go on in people's minds because, again, we're all individuals, we're all going to perceive things a little bit differently, but universally
Hmm.
we can all, I think, agree that if someone is
Hmm.
keeping us in the dark about something and we
Yes.
find out about it later,
Hmm.
that's not going to sit well with us. I don't care who
I
you
agree.
are, right? If we
And
keep
also,
a quote secret from you, it's
yes.
not a secret, but let people know that, look, this is, there's certain things that we're not going to bother you with simply because we don't want it to be a distraction or because it's not
Hmm.
relevant. And
Hmm.
I think approaching that right from the get-go,
Yes.
from the beginning, is the right way to approach it because then when it happens downstream a ways, people are going to be like, oh, well, they did tell me that, I wasn't going to be in the loop on everything because some of it just doesn't matter to me or my job
Yes.
or what I do.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. So you raise a very good point, and with that comes in the importance of timing,
Yeah.
assessing the right time of when to share and not just when. And we talked about how in terms of the sharing versus filtering, but the timing as well. Yes, it's important. Yeah, so communication is important, not just the verbal communication, written communication. Is it the memos? Is it the policies? Is it engagement through in-services, in-house workshops? Is it for those who work remotely, how are you engaging those virtual workers? How do they feel as part of the team? What are you doing to enhance engagement and make them feel that they belong as well, right?
Hmm.
So leaders need to be really innovative in ideas like that, making sure that everyone feels part of the team. And surveys, taking those surveys to get your stakeholder feedback, you know, and being honest in the sense that you might be getting feedback for consultation purposes. You may be getting feedback to actually make a change. And
Hmm.
being clear with them if it is just to hear or whether you do want to implement change. And if so, when you plan to implement change. Maybe you can implement the change in 6 months, maybe next year. But being clear and honest with the people you work with and you that work for you as well, right? So yeah.
It's amazing because, so many issues that I've seen in business, and I've been in business
Mhm,
almost 30 years,
mhm,
have so many problems have come back to communication and the
mhm,
lack of communication, right?
mhm,
Uh, it if we are, as you said, transparent, if we are open, if we are engaging, if we are
mhm.
keeping people informed
Yeah.
through whatever, right? Through emails or memos or meetings or whatever, that's going to go a long way, and it's
Yeah.
going to build trust,
Yes.
right? Instead of
Yes.
having the opposite effect, where so we want to build trust. We want our employees to trust us. We want to trust our employees. We want to trust the companies that we work with, whether it's our vendors or suppliers or
Yeah.
customers. I mean, we all want to trust each other,
Yeah.
and typically we will until there comes a time where you give someone a reason to not trust you, or they give you a reason not to trust them, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I think a communication can really, it's not going to eliminate all of that, but I think it's going to eliminate a large majority of it. Maybe 80% of the problems can be really reduced, if not eliminated, through effective, clear communications of different, sorts of information.
And I would like to add, yes, I agree, but I also like to add the power of integrity.
Yeah,
What kind
absolutely.
of leader are you? And again, not necessarily leadership in the terms of having a title that's a leadership title, but as we've all heard, leadership, a leader is one who influences others, right? So you may
Mhm.
not have that big title of a CEO or a senior leader or manager, but what are you doing whatever hierarchy, wherever you are in that hierarchy, what are you doing that influences others? Even if you're the one person that's always consistent in what they say, what they do, how they do it. You keep your promises. That's integrity. That will catch people's attention. And like we alluded to earlier, for some, it may create jealousy, but for
Mhm.
others, it will be this respect that might be unspoken or shared, right? So we need to be integrous in our dealings because from in being integrous, you think about communication. So for me, and I'll use myself as an example. For this podcast, I'm honored, thankful that you invited me to be on this podcast, but I had some delay providing some information that you needed. And I quickly apologized, didn't give excuses, provided an explanation, but owned that I should have maybe provided it to you earlier than I should have, right? So the reason I share myself as an example, when leaders are honest and own mistakes, it garners the respect of their employees. It really does. And their
Well, or
colleagues.
any associate, right? I
Yes,
mean,
and your colleagues or whoever they're partnering
absolutely.
with. When we are humble enough to admit it. And it takes a journey. What I mean by it takes a journey, humility, maybe for very few is innate, but most of us learned the hard way. Life has knocked us down. And we're like, you know what? I'm not gonna repeat that. I'm gonna be humble so that, or whatever. But you know what I
Right.
mean,
Oh,
right?
hey, being humble is not easy. So,
Yeah. Mhm.
Dr. Okoli, I really appreciate you. You shared a lot of great information with our audience. I'm sure people will be going back and rewinding and re-listening to different parts of it because it was a lot of great information that you talked about between learning about HALT and then your own recalibrate that you talked about. And go to Renata RENATA.care. Go to more, click free gift, and get your little cheat sheet on that because it's very important for anybody, working, not working, boss, employee, it doesn't matter. We all have these things that uh, are important that we understand. And the more we can do to really, empower ourselves to be more aware of the things that we can do to improve our environment, our relationships, the people around us. Very, very, very important. Talking about obviously the attribution theory. You gave people a lot of homework, doctor. but that's good. So yes, we are coming to the end of the show already. It always goes so quickly. Do you have any last thoughts or key things takeaways you'd want to leave our audience with?
I will repeat, everyone listening to me, you are needed. I want you to remember that you are needed in this world to be a solution for something. It doesn't matter what it is. I want you to be the best that you can and do not rob the world of a precious gem, you. And also, don't let the candle burn out. You are that candle. If you begin to sense you're flickering, like a candle flickers, that's a danger warning signs. Don't let the candle that is you burn out.
There you go. Burn brightly, burn strongly. I love it. I love the analogy. We were talking about candles earlier. So that's great. So, to sum up our audience, that the doctor helps, professionals, largely healthcare professionals, figure out ways that they can enhance the employees' wellness, which obviously translates into, increased productivity and optimized workplace, right? Is that like pretty much
Well
summarize
said.
that? There you go. Great. So appreciate that. And so if you're interested in learning any more about Dr. Cheryl Okoli, you can reach out to her on LinkedIn or Facebook. We'll be sure to have those links posted in the show notes on YouTube, and you could also, I'm sure, Google and find her. You said use your middle name because of Stella, right? Cheryl Stella Okoli, because there's a few other Cheryl Okolis out there, but you're the only one that matters to us, Doctor. So we appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Okay. So you have a good rest of your day, and we'll talk soon. Everybody else, thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks to the doctor for being here, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Get the latest information on Safety Talk Podcast. Until next time, everybody, stay safe.